it's so good to see you again.
Absolutely. Good to see you, Jen.
Yeah, so I know like we both went to the same college. I don't think we knew each other in college. But I'm really interested and excited to talk to you about your business and kind of how you got into test prep and helping students. But first, do you want to just like say a few words about your journey, like who you are, kind of how you got to where you are, and what you like about what you do?
Absolutely. Okay, so yes, I'm Jim Addeo, and right now, I my sole job is that I own my own business doing SAT prep as well as ACT and GRE. So I own I have my own office in Albany, New York, in Corporate Woods, which has a classroom and some small offices, and I conduct in-person classes, um, Zoom online classes for the SAT, and I do conduct one-on-one tutoring out of the office, either in person or online for SAT, ACT, and even some GRE prep. Um, and how I got there is like a pretty winding road. So I went to, same as you, Jen, I went to Cornell University, and my major there was actually atmospheric science.
Oh, that's
Um,
interesting. Mhm.
yeah, I know it's funny because people end up saying, "Oh, yeah, how did you end up where you are?" But when I was, in my mid late teens, early 20s, I was definitely a math and science person, and certainly a bit of a weather nerd. I used to love, looking at like weather radars and researching weather phenomena. And entering Cornell, I did not know exactly what direction I wanted to go in. Like I could see myself working as a meteorologist, but I also really enjoyed teaching because I had some tutoring experience, just school subject tutoring up until that point. My parents are both teachers, so teaching was always in my blood. Um, and but I decided, all right, well, I don't have an exact vision of my career, but let's, Cornell at the time when you applied, they had you declare your major or what you thought your major would be on the application. Not all colleges really do, but I said, all right, let me just. I know I'm a math science person. Let me go with the science that I am most interested in and like to nerd out on. So I said, let's just go with atmospheric science and see where that goes. And I really enjoyed that as my major and kept it as my major all throughout college. At the same time, while I was at Cornell, I did a lot of work in local high schools just as a tutor, and teaching was kind of another passion of mine. Um, and then once I graduated from Cornell, I actually spent a lot of my 20s satisfying my travel bug.
Oh,
So I wanted to do a lot of like traveling to Europe and to Asia, and believe it or not, I actually have not yet uh, gotten into the southern hemisphere at all. So I've been to
mhm.
like quite a number of countries, but I always kind of joke around that they're all northern hemisphere. So we'll see later on in life if I change that. But a really good way to travel and be able to stay overseas and be able to support yourself financially, I've discovered either in Europe or in Asia, is to take on a part-time or full-time job teaching. So a lot of countries will, are interested in having English-speaking teachers work for a couple months or a semester or a year. So that was a really good way for me to travel, but also, be able to kind of fund this and stay in a place for a while. So I've taught English as a second language in Italy, and in China, in Thailand, to name like kind of the biggest three.
That's
Um,
really cool. That sounds like so much fun.
oh, it was just amazing, and it does take a while to get your footing, and
Mhm.
it does feel certainly a bit disorienting at first, but like after like a few weeks, a month or two, it's just a wonderful thing to not be simply like just a visitor, just a tourist, to start getting used to going to work in a different country, learning the subway system, dealing with rush hour, and just seeing how things
Yeah, that you
like
feel
play
more like a
out.
local, right?
Yeah, and I felt like after a period of months, you're never going to feel the exact same way that you feel in your country of birth, but I started to feel a lot more like, oh, yeah, I understand a lot of the nuances and how to like behave and navigate, and it was just a really big growing experience, and it's a real boost to your confidence to feel like, oh yeah, I can I can do this, even if sometimes you're learning the hard way. Um, and I feel like the more like distant and different the country is, the greater the feeling of like you just confidence and satisfaction when you do start to really figure things out a little bit better.
That's so awesome.
Um,
How
so
did you
yeah,
decide?
so
Like,
that
how did you
was.
decide on which countries to go to? Like, did you kind of plan it out, or did you kind of go like month by month, or like, did you have a plan, or
I
like was it kind of just,
I didn't have a plan. It was like, a lot of times it was just maybe it was a country that like I happened to have seen like a lot of specials about on TV, and it just kind of sunk in that way. And actually, a lot of the times it was a couple of the major times in terms of Italy and China. It was another friend who said, I really have always wanted to do this. I'm interested in an
Mhm.
extended trip. I want to buy a one-way ticket. And I said, okay, sure. Like let's do it. So a lot of times it was a couple of the biggest times it was friends who inspired me to do it.
That's awesome.
Um, and yeah, I mean, when I went to China, I had a friend that inspired me to go, had a totally different goal than me. Like he just wanted to backpack and visit as much of the country as he possibly could in a several month span. I wanted to do some of that, but I was interested in like, getting a job and teaching. And so my life was a bit different. I um, ended up actually getting some sort of roots in Shanghai, um, and spending some time kind of traveling around a bit, but much of my time was just living there and working part time. And there's a different type of reward to maybe not seeing quite as many locations as my friend, but to become more embedded and attached to a certain city was something that I really appreciated. Just knowing how like the transportation works, being able to get places, learning what your favorite restaurants are, um, and actually like making friendships. That's easier to do if you're willing to like stay in one spot.
Mhm.
um, so all of this like traveling and teaching was kind of a lot that I would do, a lot of different things I did in my 20s. But the more I did that, the more I kind of gravitated towards teaching and away from a career in atmospheric science. And then when I started to get more roots in Albany, and getting engaged and getting married and having more roots that way, and really thinking, well, what do I want to do like as a longer, more grounded career? It had become teaching at that point. And then a lot of things even changed in that time. I went to graduate school. My first thought was to get a teaching degree. So to be able to work K through 12 or in high school, either math or science. Actually, like it was really more mathematics that I was interested in. So my original goal was, get a teaching degree to be able to teach mathematics in at the high school level.
Mhm.
I needed some mathematics prerequisites before I could do that because my major was atmospheric science. So I had
Mhm.
some of the math requirements, but to get into a grad program, I needed some undergraduate math. So the more I took mathematics classes, the more I became very interested in simply just learning about the math, not
Mhm.
so much like getting the education classes. So then I started to think, wow, I'm really enjoying this. Should I get my major or my, you know, uh, graduate degree in education, or should I just keep going with the math? So then I realized, okay, well, I can actually teach at the college level without a certain, a formal teaching degree, but just with a degree in math. So I said, well, maybe I'll do teach at the college level. So I stuck on that path. I ended up
Mhm.
getting a master's degree in mathematics. And then I ended up working at the college level for about 6, 7 years. So I worked at the
Mhm.
college level. Um, and mainly at Hudson Valley Community College in Albany, New York, or Troy, New
Mhm.
York, a neighboring city.
Mhm.
Um,
Very cool.
my goal was to, like a lot of other teachers, yeah, I had to start at part time, and I main part time for a while, and I just happened to be in a phase where it was or at a time where getting a full time teaching job in my area and in many areas was very difficult. There were very few positions opening. Um, COVID got in the way, and a lot of job applicants for one position. So I had a few. I applied for a few positions, got beaten by people that had PhDs, which happens a lot, and I ended up. I loved teaching at the college level. I ended up staying part time for about 6, 7 years, but during that time, I needed another means of income, so I started doing SAT tutoring and SAT like classes on the side. That was my side, um, kind of my side gig all throughout the same time.
Mhm.
But the more I did that, the more my side gig of SAT prep started to kind of take hold. I got more clients, more word of mouth. I made a website. I got an office, and um, and then that became a solid enough constant in my life that when COVID unfortunately affected a lot of people's positions at schools, um, I ended up making a transition to just having SAT prep be my full time job, and that's where I am now. That's I basically have enough of a client stream to be full time throughout the year. There's certain periods where there's a lull, like December and like June. But that's nice because then you build more curriculum or it's a forced kind of vacation. But I would say, yeah, about 10 months out of the year, there's a strong enough demand. And uh, my side hustle became my main thing. So I find that my career path was not a highly planned thing. It
Mhm.
ended up just being the product of a lot of different factors that fell into place at certain times, and I feel like that's how it, for some people it's, you want to like have a certain profession, either be an entrepreneur or a doctor, you know right from when you're 18, and you go after it and you make it happen, and that's your career. And I've noticed for myself and for a lot of other people, it's, oh yeah, what you majored in was valuable, but you ended up doing something different for grad school. But then this fell into place at another time, and I feel like that's happened not just for me, but for a lot of people around me. So it can certainly be a really winding road as to where you end up, where you do.
Right. I think it's very common actually. A lot of people I talk to, it's like that. It's not like they just study one thing and then they go with it. It's actually more common that I see that people kind of having this winding career and doing a lot of different things. And I think it's more fun that way, right? When you get to
I
experience
agree.
teaching in different countries and teaching at HBCC and then having your own business. I'm curious too, like when you start your own business, I know it was kind of happened similar to me as well, like kind of starting with a side gig and then moving into more of a main thing. Did you like, was it hard for you to like kind of do the business part of it? Because you didn't have necessarily business training, like with all that setting up a business, getting an office, and any kind of those like other things like outside of tutoring. Like, did you have to learn a lot of that?
Yeah. So I mean, in retrospect, it's easy to say, but I was like, oh, I guess if I had taken even just a couple of business classes, I would have known to do certain things instead of figuring it out the hard way. But I never had really any business education whatsoever. I didn't take an elective in college once. Didn't watch even watch any YouTube videos on how to set up a business. And so, if you're any concern that a person would have on that end, the administrative end of how do you actually run a business, deal with the finances, the taxes, like what are the right ways to keep data on previous years so you know what to do in future years. If anyone's scared of that, like use me as an example and don't be afraid because if I can do it, like anyone can. Because like I really didn't, like I said, even set myself up for success with one class. So I learned a lot of things the hard way. In terms of, I think the first thing I did was I did see an accountant, just
Mm.
like, what do I need to do, obviously, to make this financially kosher with taxes and everything. And the accountant said, well, you have to, file for an LLC. And you're going to need a separate bank account. And then once you have that, here's a bunch of papers that you'll have to fill out with the state. So I did kind of the basic things, but I figured out a lot of things the hard way. I didn't in my first year, I didn't even know that I had to like basically prepay certain taxes. So if you have a standard job, that job is simply taking money out of each paycheck for taxes and setting that aside or paying the government automatically. In your own business, each quarter of the year you have to pay prepay an assumed amount of taxes, and I didn't do that in year one. And then I had all these kind of late fees and interest and penalties.
Oh
And it
no.
wasn't cataclysmic, but I'm like, oh, I just paid $1,600 extra in my taxes because I didn't know to do this quarterly thing for the government. Um, and then I would say I'm also not super tech savvy. So, in terms of keeping certain records, I was using certain software that wasn't really designed for that. So something that was taking me like, 45 minutes a week could have just been like 5 minutes a week. And a lot of it was just, again, just ended up deciding either myself, this seems like this is too hard, there must be a better thing for this, and then YouTubing that or Googling that and then seeing this software, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I need. Or just talking to other people in business who would say, wait, you're doing it this way, all you need is like, this app on your phone. And I think to this very day, I think I've gotten better and better, but it's just been purely organically. And like I said, in retrospect, if I could go back and even just take two business classes, I probably would have saved myself a lot of time and money. Um, but it just goes to show that in a lot of things in life, yeah, you can just kind of like get into it, put it together piece by piece. But absolutely, one of the biggest challenges for me is the business end. And to be honest, I I love being in the classroom. I love teaching. I love tutoring. I love all that part. And and the business end of it, just dealing with all the administrative stuff, paperwork, finances. I don't love it, but I have become better at it in terms of, of efficiency. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other things I could be doing differently. But at least I've come a long way.
Yeah, but that's really inspiring to hear because I think, whoever's watching this, if you're a student or a high school student, and you're interested in having a business. I think a lot of my students nowadays, they say, what do you want to do when you grow up? Or what do you want to do after college? They say, I want to start my own business, or I want to like be an entrepreneur. But sometimes they don't know what that is. Like they just know they want to have a business, but they don't necessarily know what that business is going to be. So I think it's great advice that like if people are at least like having that interest, and it would be good to take a couple classes, or I think nowadays, learning online as well is really good too. But
I
it is
would,
inspiring
yeah.
to hear that like you can do it, even if you don't.
Yes, yes, you can do it from nothing, but right. If I could go back in time, I would do I would do a couple things. Number one, I would take a couple of business or entrepreneurial classes just as electives in college, because it is so common now that people are on one career track and then like have a different passion and set up a business. So I would say, oh yeah, if I could go back in time, I would take, one or two classes on business, anything entrepreneurial. And then the other thing that's funny is there's one other field where I've like, if I could go back in time, I would do this. I
Mhm.
just wish I was more handy. Like
Oh.
people own a house often at some point in your life, and I basically call someone for everything. I'm like, man, if I had just done like a couple of carpentry classes like as electives in college or in high school, like even just a couple of lower level things, like I would be doing 25% of this work easily on my own and not spending all the
It's so
time.
expensive, right?
It's so expensive. So those are, and like I said, if I could go back in time, entrepreneurship and carpentry, if I could go back, just dabble in it a little bit, would be like exactly what I would go back and tell my former self.
Well, it's never too late, Jim. You can always
That's
still take those carpentry classes.
that's true. You're right. It is absolutely never too late. So I don't want my 65-year-old self to be talking to me right now, Ken. So maybe I should.
Well, you mentioned having some help from other business owners, and I think it's true, like especially for solopreneurs, like if you have a company that's really just yourself, which is also me, it can get lonely sometimes, right? And you can like run into roadblocks. What's your strategy for like finding other people who might be maybe not necessarily in the same field, but they might be a little bit farther ahead in their business, to like kind of get that mentorship?
Um, so I guess I would say that I've like a lot of it for me has been serendipity and luck. Like, oh, I ran into this person, uh, and they're doing something similar. But a couple of things other than just relying on luck. Um, I would say don't just stick to the exact field you're in. So I'm an SAT, prep expert, but there's fields that aren't test prep that are related. And a perfect example is me and you, Jen. So you're a college
Mhm.
admissions counselor. Um, and the SAT is one factor in getting admitted to a college. So while our businesses aren't exactly the same, there's a lot of similarities in terms of managing a clientele flow, um, sending out like emails, advertising, like attaining new clients. even just working with the tech. So I would say don't limit yourself to your own field. Think about what other fields are kind of satellite fields to yours. And yeah, like just ask the question, yeah, how do you manage this? And half the time, like the person you're talking to is going to have a more efficient way than you. I know that, like, I don't know about every state, but New York State definitely has um, like programs and people in place to help entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some of these programs are completely free. And obviously, for each state, it's going to be different. But if you were to Google, um, you know, programs in whatever state to help entrepreneurs, there are actually like counselors, some free and some paid, that help you set up a business. Like, what's the right order of things, what's the most efficient way to do things, what's the right software. So in whatever state you're in, like Google that thing, that type of thing, because those, I didn't know this, and it took um my cousin's husband, who happens to be an entrepreneur, to say, wait, you didn't know that the state has these things?
Mm-hmm.
So reach out to friends, but also just see what your own state has in terms of, like, support for new business owners.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because they want more business, right? They're always talking about like helping small business, so they always have those resources.
Right, exactly.
That's cool. Well, what do you think, Jim? Like, what's the future look like? So, I mean, there's a lot of changes with testing, SAT going digital, ACT going digital also. And then some schools going test optional, some schools like the UCs, like they don't look at tests anymore. What do you see like in the future? Like, are you going to kind of stick with the test prep, or do you have any plans to expand to different areas? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I absolutely do. And I think just in terms of the test prep world itself, definitely COVID 19 called a lot of question to whether or not testing of this nature would continue. There was definitely a pretty strong push to say, well, it's logistically extremely difficult to even implement testing. Maybe we should take a harder look at what the value of standardized testing really is. And there was at least a push by certain powers to want to get away from it. And so I didn't know actually if the industry would remain alive and healthy, or if we take a completely different direction. And a lot of people, and especially business owners during COVID, felt the same way about their businesses, regardless of what field. And then in terms of my field, it seems like the we've started to reach a point that's fairly stable, because a lot of changes occurred, but it's fairly stable in terms of um, colleges maintaining a test optional status. And right now, about 80% of colleges are SAT and ACT optional, meaning that you do not need it to complete your application, but it can be a factor in helping you get into that college.
Right.
And then about 10% of schools are test blind, where they don't look at it at all, don't want to see that data. And then 10% of schools are now back to requiring the SAT.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that the demand for the SAT exam in the test optional atmosphere we have actually has roughly stayed the same. So overall, I see, yet like the place for standardized testing, even though the atmosphere is different, is still there. I
Mm-hmm.
suspect that, like, my pursuing this type of business will still be totally feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, you asked about a different direction, and one thing that certainly has lasted even post COVID is people learning online either live online or recorded online more.
Mhm.
So my next venture is within my field is to develop more um, more just videos, more textbooks, and more curriculum that's of a self teaching nature. Um, so as a teacher at heart, I love the classroom best and human interaction, but there is a lot of people do take it upon themselves to learn a new field or area or study for a test. And one thing I feel like that's really lacking in the SAT realm, if you're going to just do a self-taught program, whenever I look at Amazon as to what textbooks exist for the SAT, most of them just involve the entire exam. They're a big book and they involve all the math topics, the grammar, the reading, writing, and all the question types in one. And I've noticed a lot of students, they feel very strong everywhere, but they just need help in grammar, or they feel
Mhm.
excellent about the math, but they just need help in geometry specifically. And I realized like there actually isn't a lot of either comprehensive videos or textbooks that will just cover SAT grammar or will
More
just
targeted.
cover. Right. So
Mhm.
instead of buying a 550-page book with a ton of stuff, maybe you just need a 60-page like grammar focused book that's all just SAT grammar. And I feel like this is not out there. This is a need.
Mhm.
Um, what if it's very easy now to become published. One source is just the fact that websites like Teachable or even Amazon will, if you create some valuable software, video, textbook, it's a platform that you can just sell this type of material on. Um, Decades ago, you had to find a publisher that was willing to take on,
Mhm.
your material. Um, and you may or may not get a deal with that publisher. And now it's more, all right, well, yeah, there's platform for this. You can put it on there. If it's really good material, people will buy it and it'll get traction. And if it's not good enough, it might not. But it seems like there's a lot less barriers to trying that.
Sure.
So I've noticed that the only reason why I've noticed this need, either textbooks or video or a combination of both, that focuses only on specific areas, is because my students have asked for it. They said, is there a book I can get that's only this, or that, it's
Mhm.
only part A or B or C of the test? And then I've done research and said, well, I don't know. I maybe found something that kind of works. It's not perfect, but try this. And I realized I don't have a good answer for that. And
Mhm.
as an entrepreneur, I've seen this a million times, even on shows like Shark Tank. It's usually
Mhm.
something like that where the person needs the thing, they look for it and it's not there.
Mhm.
And I, they say like, you know that need is the mother of invention, or
Right.
something like that, right? Necessity
Yeah.
is the
Mhm.
mother of invention. And so, yeah, that's kind of happened organically, but that's my next plan, is to move forward. Is can I start maybe developing a series of either text or video lessons, or a combination of both, each one hitting a very niche area of the test for the people that just have highly focused needs. So we'll see. You'll have to ask me again
Yeah,
in
no,
a
that's
year or
great.
two if
That sounds like a
I
great idea. I mean, I
yeah.
think it's something that I'm working on too, like struggling, working on like trading time for money, right? Because I think when you're tutoring, then you're just tutoring, or like if I'm doing a consultation, then that's my time, and most of my work is one-on-one. Um, so yeah, having that resource not only frees me up to like say, okay, just watch this and then I'll talk to you, you know? Um,
Hey,
or also you can help more people because not everybody can afford the one-on-one or like some of the classes can be pricey. So
right,
that they can just have this book and then maybe that'll really help them and you can
right.
help more people that way.
Right. But the number one complaint for something like that is like that the books are just too overwhelming. Like I just need
Mhm.
this. And then it's like when you get, if you can create something that's 60 pages that gets right to the point, that's exactly what you need. And it's also less money because it's less material. I feel like, yeah, this really could work. And you're right. I guess the one difficult thing, and you said it right, is for an entrepreneur is time. If you're only one person, you're always trading time for money, um, and you want to reach a point where a business is either more automatic, offers you more freedom, because you don't want your business to become so overwhelming that even if you're earning a lot of money, it's a little bit of a prison in terms of taking up all your time.
Mhm.
So I'd say a big goal of many entrepreneurs, myself and people I've talked to at times in their life, is not so much how do I earn more money, but maybe how do I earn the same amount of money for
Mhm.
only 80% as much time? And then if you can get to that point, can I earn the same amount of money or maybe a little bit more, but for only 60% as much time? And
Mhm.
things like passive income from things that you've created like software or video or anything you've published. I think for a lot of people, passive income has become a very, very attractive pursuit. I know it definitely is for me. And even if it was a very modest amount, like even if I created a bunch of textbooks, um, or video, and that turned out to be, let's say it was only 10% of my income, it was a
Mhm.
supplement that was pretty mild. If I was either making 10% more money or as a result working 10% less, that's not nothing. And then when you get to that point, like, can you push that further?
Sure.
So I think that's one thing I would say to anyone who is looking into the kind of the entrepreneurial world is you will probably reach a point, in at some point in your business where where money obviously is always great and you always want to earn more, but money may not become the primary goal, but rather, um, maintaining that money for less time. I think the further you get into a business, the more you want to manage time well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think especially too, like for a lot of the topics, I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. So it's like, well, okay, if I just had this on a video or like some kind of reading material, then when I meet with the student, then we can really talk about the deeper stuff rather than like having to kind of go from square one and just like explain the basics like over and over again.
Absolutely. And I need to do so much more of that myself. Certain things, you understand this very well. Certain things, parts of your client relationship, you need to spend that time and you need to have that conversation with them.
Right.
There is no shortcut. But
Hmm.
sure, you have to look at how many things, as you say, are you basically just saying the same things over? They're fairly simple. Um, and another example for me right now is when if a student is in a group class and they are going to be absent and they miss a class,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
half the time I'm I'm individually getting in touch with that student about how they can make up missed work, or I'm conducting a one-on-one tutoring session to help them stay caught up. But
Hmm.
if I'm constantly doing all of these extras every time someone misses one class, which is often, this needs to be much more automated. And I realize, oh, I need to make, a series of videos that are makeup videos that you just go to my website, click on
Mhm.
this. And if you were to miss a class, it may not be like exactly the quality of being in the classroom, but it's a way that, like, all right, this is automatic. They just go here and this is how they make it up. Um, and like I said, certain crucial things, maybe there is no substitute for just spending the time one on one, but you have to look at how many things in your business can just be easily like sped up or automated. And you have to be careful. You don't want to lean so far in that direction that your business isn't personal enough now
Mhm.
too, but you
Right.
just got to roll with it and see, all right, did I push the needle too far this way? Maybe I need to come back a bit. And that's something every entrepreneur deals with.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like you're having so much fun with your own business, and even though it's not something you necessarily planned ahead of time, but it's been a great ride.
Yeah, oh, I wouldn't trade it. It's, there's a lot of things about running a business that are trying and difficult, but there's, you know, no greater sense of freedom too. It's just nice that it's like, okay, if I make the decision that I no longer want to work full days on Friday, I want to do a half day, or you know what, I'm not going to work the 2 weekends around this holiday, or I'm only going to work, half time in summer. There's nobody telling you that you can't do that except the client. Obviously, you have to do things within certain windows, but I tell myself to try not to take it for granted that
Mhm.
I have a job where ultimately I make all the decisions about how much I work, when I work, and and how things are driven. And I forget that like in other job in a job where you are working for a company, you don't have that freedom necessarily. It's like, well, you do have to fall within certain guidelines. um, and believe me, that has its advantages too, to not own your own business and not have to worry about like doing certain things like taxes and so forth yourself. And it's just it's pros and cons and give and take. But I try to like remind myself of like the advantages of being an entrepreneur, and one of those is definitely like freedom of choice, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. So last question was actually maybe two questions.
Sure.
Um, well, I was just curious, so we both went to the same college. I was wondering like if you have advice for students who are going into college, like what they should expect, like how they should take advantage of the things at a college. I'd love to reminisce with you a little bit about like your experience at Cornell. Like what were your favorite parts and what were some of the things that you really loved about the school or about the experience?
So one thing, and this it was a difficult transition for me at
Mhm.
first, but one thing is the independence. It's just okay. Like I'm living on my own. I'm making my own decisions about like, keeping up with classes, when I do my homework, how I manage my time. And actually like everybody adapts to that at different paces and in different ways. And for some people it's easier than others. I'll admit that for me, it was actually pretty difficult for me, the shock of now being away at Cornell and not being in home. Like it took me like a few months to like kind of work that out. I did well academically, but just kind of mentally like, oh, this is like tough. I have to make all my own decisions. And but I think it's just the same as when I mentioned going to a new country, working there, and the discomfort of like not knowing how a certain city works and culturally how you should behave in certain situations. But then once you do that and realize, wow, I can do this. I can function uh, as someone born in Albany, New York, but now living in Shanghai, China. Like the same way that is rewarding, like I think a big reward for me in college was just feeling like, wow, yeah, I'm managing my time and my classes, or and I even have this part-time job, and I'm in this club, and I'm doing this all myself. That was something that took like the better part of the first semester for me, but I would tell everybody, like, look forward to that. Just this feeling of accomplishment of being your, own, really your own person who guides all your decisions, because it's just a wonderful feeling, and it propels you to kind of a new level and sense of self. Um, and then, like, on like a smaller note, the one thing that I would say to a lot of people, uh, something I would have changed. I ended up actually not coming into Cornell with a whole lot of like AP college credit. So I had to get just about all of the 120 credits that you need to graduate, whereas another student might be coming in with like 17 AP credits already. I ended up early on doing some semesters where I really took on a lot of classes. So generally, you take on 4 classes, about like 14 to 16 credits. And I had some semesters where I did 5, and it was like 20 credits because I wanted to
A
make sure I
lot.
got A's or get
Yeah.
ahead. That might work for some people, but it was the hardest, least fun semesters that I
Mhm.
had were when I did 5 classes where maybe 4 of them were very difficult. Um, and I think other than it just being stressful and time consuming and difficult, I don't feel like I got the most out of those classes. Even if my grades were fine, I didn't feel like I had the mental energy to devote in a way where I was really soaking things in, learning it, and actually enjoying it. Um, and then I realized this isn't working so great. And if I do need to take an extra course, I decided then maybe I'll do it in the summer, uh, at SUNY Albany or wherever, just get the credits that way, so that the next semester I can only take 4. I only have to take 4 classes, or even like 3 4 credit courses, which is like the minimum for kind of full time.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed my life and college, like, and the classes so much more when, and got more out of them when I didn't overload. So I
Yeah.
will, everybody's different, and I wouldn't tell somebody else that they couldn't do it, but I would say, look, even if you ha- have the ability to graduate in 3.5 years instead of 4, if you take on X amount more credits per semester, um, I would say, like, listen to yourself and see how that's going, and maybe you'll have a way better experience. Just listen to yourself, see how that's going. And if it's not going great, and it means, what, maybe I should graduate in 4 years instead of 3.5, I would say to somebody, what's the rush? Like, get the
Mhm.
most out of each semester, enjoy it. The difference between something like 4 years and 3.5, if you're talking about your enjoyment level, like, I don't think it's worth the trade, and also just the level of education.
Yeah, because it's not just about taking classes, right? Like there's so much outside of classes that you can learn from and participate in, like leadership or activities, just
Right.
having fun. So I feel like that's so much more sometimes like when I remember like my time in college, I definitely remember those things more than my classes.
Yeah. So yeah, enjoy your life. Like, make time, have space. Don't hustle. You have to hustle sometimes in life, but don't hustle every single minute. Also, just take the time. That's kind of the advice I give a lot of people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jim. I so appreciate your time and looking forward to continue to work with you in the future to maybe your new venture with books or we can find other ways to collaborate. So I'm really excited.
Absolutely. I'm excited too. And thank you so much for welcoming me into this interview. And yeah, it's been great, even as self exploration, to say all this.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim.